Welcome into the Fantasy Football Forge. My name is Steve, and it is time for the Week 11 running back rankings. Not a great week for running backs, unfortunately. I would say when we get into my second tier, I just have 3 tiers. When we get into my second tier, I think I mostly focus on the positive for the players, but for the most part, there's more concerns for the players and or the matchups or how they've been performing as of late, etc., than there are positive things. So just keep that in mind this week. Not a great running back week, so there will be some tough decisions to be made. Now, Thursday night, tomorrow night, I will be live 1.5 hours prior to kickoff of the Thursday night football game, and on Sunday, I will be live 3 hours prior to the game. In each instance, I'll be here on YouTube in order to help you with any of your start-sit questions. Any other questions that you have, we can just talk and hang out too if it's not that busy at that point in time. So please come join me, us, the community. It's always, I have a good time with y'all. That's enough said. I think with any color codes that you see on this screen, red is good, blue is bad, white is going to be right in the middle, neutral. So, week 10, how did I do with my DFS buys that I gave you? I'll have some DFS buys for week 11 at the end of this video. I said that for a pay for him, that Christian McCaffrey could be worth every penny at $9,200, and he was not necessarily worth it. He ended as the running back 6. Wasn't one of those big days that you wanted. And just to let you know for the future purposes, if I spend up for one of those top few guys at a position, more often than not, they absolutely bust. This wasn't an absolute bust, but they're not worth it almost ever. So don't follow me with those high costing players. Good price guy. I give you Aaron Jones at $6,500. Pittsburgh is a plus matchup, and he's what makes this offense roll, is what I said. Well, the offense, I guess, did not roll. He ended as the running back 32. Contrarian play, I gave you Kenneth Walker. Said that he would probably be overlooked at $6,800. Breece Hall, Jonathan Taylor are priced just under him. Were priced just under him. David Montgomery, Josh Jacobs were priced just a little bit more than him, and I said that he would be the forgotten man inside of that group. I don't know for sure if he was the forgotten man, but he did end up as the running back 7, and he outscored all of those names that I brought up. So I give 2 thumbs up to that little contrarian play. And for a big tournament long shot, gave you Jaylen Warren at $5,000. Said that whatever, I liked him. Finished as a running back 8, so I think he was worth every penny compared to Christian McCaffrey there. And for my love'ems and my fade'ems, I gave you, for my fade'ems, I gave you Jerome Ford and Alexander Madison. Alexander Madison got injured, so that doesn't matter, but Jerome Ford finished as the running back 23, so that's probably somewhere around where I had him ranked. Was concerned about him, didn't have a big day, and so I would say that that worked out all right. And for my love'ems, I gave you Javonte Williams and Deonta Foreman, so okay, I did pretty good with this. Javonte Williams ended as the running back 6, and Deonta Foreman ended as the running back 13. So let's get on to the Week 11 rankings. Welcome back. On the screen somewhere, you can now see my first tier of running backs. It's a group of 9 guys: Christian McCaffrey, Austin Eckler, Travis Etienne Jr., Devon Achane, Jahmyr Gibbs, Josh Jacobs, Raheem Mostert, Breece Hall, and DeAndre Swift, all in my top 9 there. And these are the guys who I would say are my must-start options. I'm going to start them, and I'm not really going to question it one bit. That doesn't mean they're all in great matchups or anything like that, but 'tis the case. They're, for the most part, pretty good matchups for them. The only thing that I do want to say about this group is going to include a guy from the next group, and that's just going to be the comparison this week between Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery. So I am not out on David Montgomery. I do think that part of the reason that he was used last week was just him coming back from injury, but we will see on that it would be concerning for David Montgomery owners if that's going to be his usage going forward. Was not very high. Got had a huge play for a touchdown, which really salvaged a day, which we don't know what it would have looked like. We don't know how that drive works otherwise, but might not have been too great. So here's the thing about their opponent, the Bears. The Bears have allowed the 12th most fantasy points per game to the running back position, so that's a good thing, right? Well, the Bears also allow the single least yards per rushing attempt. Which of these 2 running backs are the more up-the-gut rushers? It's David Montgomery. The Bears have allowed the 3rd least rushing touchdowns per game. Once again, if they do get into a situation where they're close to the end zone, it's probably David Montgomery getting those carries, but for whatever reason, they haven't allowed a whole lot of those rushing touchdowns all season long. And the Bears see the 6th least rushing attempts per game. So it's not like teams are even running a whole lot against them. All these things working against David Montgomery. So that's all stuff that is relative to the guy rushing the ball, not the running back position, because we know that the running back position, they allow the 12th most fantasy points per game. And that's because they suck against receiving backs, and that is where Jahmyr Gibbs comes in. So I think this is another Jahmyr Gibbs week. The David Montgomery upside, we'll just cover David Montgomery now, is that in week 5 he had 6 targets. We know that he is a decent receiving back from his time in Chicago. But wait a second, if anybody says that, then remind them that that is one of the weeks where Jahmyr Gibbs was not playing, and thus David Montgomery took over that receiving role that week. Other than that, he has not had a whole lot of targets throughout the season, averaging, I think, over 1, less than 2, like barely over 1 per game. Let's move on to the second tier running backs. And you will see this is a pretty big tier, starting at running back 10 with Saquon Barkley, followed by Brian Robinson Jr., Aaron Jones, Jerome Ford, Tony Pollard, Kenneth Walker, Joe Mixon, David Montgomery, Rashad White, Javonte Williams, Derrick Henry, and James Conner to fill that out at running back 21. Big tier. And really, you can shuffle these guys up in a lot of different ways if you wish. I have already shuffled them up a few times myself. This is the most recent iteration. And of course, on Sunday are my final rankings. On Friday evening, I do my rankings update video, which comes out Saturday morning. So as of Friday evening, usually you could go log on to the website, www.theffforge, where you can find all my complete rankings, which I forgot to say at the beginning of this video, didn't I? So good thing I stumbled into that. You can find them up on the website, link down in the description. The website's also up ahead of me. And so that's where you can find my rankings. Once again, like I said, the big update happens like Friday evening. And then I do a video on that as well. But some little updates still may occur based on things that we're unsure of from that point through Sunday morning. And Saquon Barkley is my running back 10, and it's terrifying to rank him this high. The thing is that he is the New York Giants offense, and opportunity is king, and he's going to get opportunities. Also, Washington, the Commanders, they are a mid matchup as far as how good they are against the run, and they don't necessarily specialize against the run on the ground or through the air, and we know Saquon Barkley can do both, so just totally kind of a middling matchup in both regards there. What gives me some hope for the New York Giants offense as a whole, and maybe increases my hopes for Saquon Barkley to get a touchdown at some point, is that the lack of pass rush from this Washington team now against this terrible offensive line from the New York Giants. Does that just kind of equal out? I think there's a good chance that it might, and the New York Giants offensive line might at least just, have an averagely okay game this week against Washington, and that should help Saquon. Then at running back 11, we have Brian Robinson, and this is a great B-Rob matchup compared to Antonio Gibson type of matchup. This is the 9th best running back matchup, as I talked a little bit about with the Jahmyr Gibbs versus the David Montgomery argument. It's the opposite of that. Brian Robinson is the David Montgomery of this duo, and they allow the 3rd most yards per rush on average. That is the New York Giants. They don't allow a lot of receptions to running backs. That would be the Antonio Gibson role. And they do allow a lot of rushing attempts. Once again, that should be Brian Robinson's role. So I like Brian Robinson this week. A safe play, if nothing else. Aaron Jones, running back 12. Los Angeles Chargers are a really good matchup for Aaron Jones, specifically compared to A.J. Dillon. Same kind of argument here. Aaron Jones is more of the receiving back than A.J. Dillon is. The Chargers are not bad against running backs on the ground, and they allow the 2nd most receptions per game to the running back position amongst all teams in the league, so that's where Aaron Jones could take advantage of this matchup. Jerome Ford, running back 13. Deshaun Watson just had his season-ending injury. I'm not going to say that is a good thing for the running backs. It definitely is not for their ceiling. It might give them a little bit of a higher floor, and I do say them because I think that this helps Kareem Hunt's outlook going forward. They should have more rushing attempts per game. He should have to spell Jerome Ford a little bit more through the game, get a little bit more usage for him. So if anything, maybe this gives them a higher floor. It probably equals out because the odds of getting a touchdown are now less with P.J. Walker in at quarterback. You thought Deshaun Watson wasn't playing good at quarterback for them. Well, P.J. Walker is about half as good as that. So it hasn't been pretty with PJ Walker in at quarterback. But I do like Jerome Ford quite a bit. He averages over 13.7 fantasy points if you remove his week 1 game where Nick Chubb was the starter, and the week 8 game when he returned early from his injury. Wasn't really used throughout the first half, even into the third quarter, and he really received the lowest share of the backfield work on the entirety of the season, I think even lower than that week 1 game. He's a top 15 running back going up against a top 10 running back matchup in Pittsburgh, top 10 meaning a positive matchup for him. So I do feel comfortable and like Jerome Ford a fair bit this weekend. Tony Pollard, running back 14, and Ken Walker, running back 15. Do I feel comfortable with either of these two? No, I really do not. Pollard should be able to take advantage of a great matchup going up against Carolina defense that I think is the best running back matchup that there is in the entirety of the league. But will Pollard be able to take advantage of it? I don't know. And Kenneth Walker has had less usage over the past 3 weeks, and that has hurt his productivity in 2 of those 3 games. Last week, it felt a little bit lucky, the 1 game where he did have good productivity, but that is how Ken Walker tends to produce for fantasy in big chunks. On those 2 bad games, those 2 weeks where he had bad games, he went up against 2 of the better run defenses in the league in Cleveland and Baltimore. The Rams themselves are closer to Cleveland and Baltimore than they are Washington, the team that they just did well. Kenneth Walker had a big game against last week, but Washington also hasn't been terrible against the run. So it's just kind of a toss-up for Ken Walker, and no, I don't feel comfortable with it. Joe Mixon, I have him at running back 16, and it's not a good matchup, but it's not terrible either going up against Baltimore, and I expect that there is a higher chance that this is a shootout than it is defensive slaughter, and my opinion might change on that. Joe Mixon is one of the ones who it's the last people that I moved up a little ways in the rankings. I believe I had him all the way back, maybe behind Derrick Henry or ahead of Derrick Henry by a spot, somewhere around there until a short bit ago. David Montgomery, running back 17. We already spoke about him. Then Rachaad White at running back 18. It's not a good matchup, but you do appreciate the high floor due to his receiving abilities going up against San Francisco. Javonte Williams, running back 19. Minnesota is stout against the run, the opponent this week. They are the 6th worst running back matchup via average fantasy points allowed to the running back position on a weekly basis, of course. And since week 7, when Javonte Williams finally took control of the backfield, he has averaged 15.8 fantasy points per week. So expecting just kind of an average game from Javonte when you mash those 2 things together. You can see the player heat engage is kind of like, maybe not a great big game for him, but shouldn't be a terrible game. Derrick Henry, running back 20, very game flow dependent kind of running back this season. Unfortunately, it's not a great matchup going up against Jacksonville, and Tyjae Spears could be a sneaky start because Jacksonville allows the most receptions to the running back position in the entirety of the league. Something like 9+ targets and 7.5 receptions, I believe. If Spears can get 6 of those receptions, that'll be huge. Then at running back 21, we have James Conner, and it's a middling matchup. Last week was not everything that we hoped for James Conner, but it was his first week back from injury, so I would expect him to take on more of the work going forward. He is a candidate to be moved up for me, but once again, last week was concerning. I would have liked to see a little bit more than that from him. So let's move on to my 3rd tier, the last tier that we will look at in this video. Once again, the entirety of my rankings, I have some, 60 running backs ranked. You can find them up on the website, www.theffforge.com. Running back 22, I have Isaiah Pacheco, followed by Gus Edwards, James Cook, Ty Chandler, Darrell Henderson, Najee Harris, and Jalen Warren to wrap this tier up at running back 28. And I just wrote one quick thing on them. Isaiah Pacheco is in a terrible matchup. Don't really like him a whole lot this week. Very concerned if I have to start him. On the plus side for Gus Edwards, he could fall into the end zone very easily in this matchup. It would not be a surprise. Cincinnati is not spectacular against the rushing touchdowns in that category as a statistic. At running back 24, we have James Cook, and he is tough to trust, but it's not a bad matchup, and the new offensive coordinator could be worth speculating on in terms of being a more good thing for James Cook going forward. At running back 25, we have Ty Chandler, and he's in a very good matchup going up against Denver. Running back 26, we have Darrell Henderson, and he's in a quite good matchup, not very good, going up against Seattle. Najee Harris, it's a bad matchup, but I ended up putting him ahead of Jalen Warren, who's obviously also in a bad matchup against Cleveland, and neither one of their skill sets necessarily works best against Cleveland. For what they allow to running backs, they're pretty good in both categories. Yards per carry, and attempts and all of that, just limiting fantasy points scored against him on the ground, as well as limiting fantasy points against them through the receiving backs work. But one area that they're not necessarily spectacular in has been the touchdown category. They will allow you to run into the end zone sometimes, and so I think Najee Harris gets the bump there, and I think that that's what the projections we're looking at too when you look at the upper end there, with Najee just beating out Jaylen Warren by a little bit there. 11.3 to 10.9 fantasy points. And it is now time to figure out who we are going to be. I did not do Love'ems Fade'ems, so I will give you my Love'ems Fade'ems and my DFS buys for the week. I'll be right back. Alright, so I've got my Fade'ems and my Love'ems of the week. You can see up on the screen. Saquon Barkley, gonna put a fade on that. Feels kind of like a cop-out, but at the same time, you probably have to play him. And at the same time, you should probably look for an out if you can with Saquon. But opportunity is king. I don't know. It's tough, really tough. It's an obvious fade. I feel like I'm copying out there, but yeah. Let's move on to David Montgomery, my other fade. And it's the matchup here against Chicago. They're really good against the ground rushing attack. I do think it's very possible that he falls into the end zone for a touchdown. 2 of them, definitely very possible. But if he doesn't, I don't think it's a good week. I think it's a pretty bad week. So that is the concern for him. And he very well may not, too, right? Then Jerome Ford is a Love'em for me. I figure that everybody may not be playing him, and teams that have him might also have other running backs who have come back and are healthier now. Well, I just want to put it out there. I think that you should definitely start Jerome Ford, get him into your lineup, and I think that you should feel comfortable starting Ty Chandler this week if you happen to get him off of the waiver wire. Should be a pretty solid week for him going up against Denver, and I think, honestly, if I recall correctly, part of the reason that it was a very good matchup is because Denver's not great against receiving backs, and Ty Chandler should be able to add that element into this offense and maybe capitalize off of that a little bit as well. Now, let's get on to my DFS buys. All right, so this week, it might be worth paying up for your running backs. As I said, there are some concerns. However, that being said, I thought there were quite a few good-priced options as well. For a guy who I think is worth paying up is going to be Jahmyr Gibbs. I think he's going to have a big week. It's setting up for that. So at 7,000 DK bucks, I like that. Ended up settling on Jerome Ford at 5,200 because he was less than the other options I was initially going to give you, but Aaron Jones was a solid price, as well as Breece Hall was a good price, so I liked both of them. Contrarian play, going to give you James Cook at 6,100. Doesn't seem like he's coming at a discount for how he's produced. Going to have a new offensive coordinator there. Don't know about that whole situation, but if you're looking to differentiate your lineup, I would imagine James Cook, I'm sure there'll be other people thinking along the same lines and take a shot on him in a good matchup this weekend. But it also isn't one of those matchups that you think is good against the New York Jets. So I like James Cook to potentially help differentiate your lineup. And then for a big tournament long shot, I don't know if he fully fits into that long shot category, but Ty Chandler at 4,800 bucks seems like one of the better values that you can find as well, along with like Jerome Ford. So those are my DFS buys of the week. Those are my Fade'ems and Love'ems. Thank you very much for coming on through. Please like, comment, and subscribe if you wish to. And I appreciate you very much. Peace out.